sometimes we do just put those together. Calling equals career. And I would definitely disagree. I think that the calling is sort of it feels like there's that spiritual element, that sort of divine appointment to it. I know that in some of the research I've read that there are individuals who feel they have a calling and it may not even be connected to the spiritual. They may be a non-believer, but they feel like that what they do, the job they have, the work they do to help others is their calling, their mission, their purpose. And so when we think about defining calling, I think those two words, mission, purpose, are in alignment with that calling, meaning that the calling and the career can be two different things. And they're not, while they can be the same, they're not always.
Hello, I'm Xander, and this is the Days Before podcast. As someone who went to college, I struggled with trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do after school. There were so many fields I could lean into, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do myself. But there's another question looming over my head. Once I chose my field, should I work for the church? From the people I talked to, there's a wide range of good and bad responses to work or not to work for the church. Eventually, I did feel called to work for the Kentucky Tennessee Conference, and I'm happy to be here now. I just know that's not the case for everyone. Which is why today, I brought Daniel Olson. He is the Employer Relations and Internship Coordinator for Southern Adventist University. So hello, Daniel. Welcome.
Thank you, Xander.
Yeah. So let's start out. Can you tell me exactly what your job is here at Southern?
Absolutely. So I've worked at Southern Adventist University for about 8 years in our Life Calling and Career Services department. And the services that I offer to students range from helping students take career tests, interpret those assessments, help students writing resumes, practicing for job interviews. Also do a number of presentations for classes, talking about networking and how to find employment and how to set yourself up for success. I also am in charge of our career fair that we do twice a year. And I'm also a certified strengths coach, helping students learn about their talents and gifts and how they might use them.
Oh, interesting. That's really nice. Sounds like a lot of fun. You get to interact with students a lot.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, do you get that students come up to you as with the question of should they work inside the church, or is it they should find somewhere else to work at?
Well, I think it's a question that a lot of students ask themselves is, where should I work? What is going to set me up for success in my life? For some of those students, they have questions about working for the church, being involved in ministry. Sometimes they feel like they need to balance, what they're doing with other opportunities out there. So I think it is a question that a lot of students face as they're trying to choose their major and their career path.
So what would you recommend to them then?
Well, I think one of the challenges for students when they start college is answering that question of, what should I study? What should I major? And one of the things that I think sometimes students have to battle is getting advice from a lot of different people, people that are well-intentioned, but there's a lot of different things that they have to consider. They have to consider their interests, things that they enjoy doing. They have to consider their skills, their talents, where their abilities lie and what are some of the God-given gifts that they have and how they might use them. And so kind of looking at those different things and what might be a good fit for them is definitely a wise thing to do. As far as the advice goes, I think I'm normally trying to tell students, take your time. And I feel like that's actually a mantra I've had in the last year or two, is encouraging students to take a little bit more time or to not make decisions before they have to. Sometimes they might feel stress, pressure from friends, family, professors to make decisions quickly. Sometimes they need to take some time and look for different answers.
That makes sense. I know before we started recording, you mentioned to me how in your personal life, you found this idea of calling a little bit, take your time, like you said. Can you go into a little more into that?
Yeah, certainly. I think sometimes, and I know that at the university level, we talk about careers and finding your calling, and sometimes those are the same and sometimes they're not. I think that for myself, I think about the different things I've done in my life. I've come from an academic background and actually in journalism. When I was a student at Southern, my bachelor's was in print journalism, and I worked in that field for almost a decade before transitioning and pivoting into getting a degree in counseling, and then considering several things along the way there. And I think that one of the things that I remind students is that sometimes we don't necessarily find our calling right away. I've been blessed to work for the university for about 8 years, but a little part of my story is that about 3 years ago I left Southern. I actually went and worked for about a year as a recruiter. I used some of the same skills that I use with helping students prepare for the workforce in that role, and did that for about a year and learned a lot. And then Providence had it that I came back and I continued to work at Southern. And it was the coming back where I kind of realized this is my calling, and that it's taken me, almost 20 years after I graduated from college to realize that the role that I have now and the work that I do with students is a lot more aligned with my calling than what I did when I first finished college.
Oh, wow. So basically, like, if you're a student in college or approaching college and you really don't know what exactly you want to do, like, or you're worried about your calling, maybe just not worry so much. It might happen in college, or like you said, it might happen way after college. But like eventually, do you think students will eventually find a calling?
I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that most students will. It's also interesting because we sometimes equate those as the same thing, the career and calling, and we use those terms together sometimes, but they don't always go together. Sometimes our career is exactly that. It's employment. It's something that allows us to be able to meet some of the demands of our life financially and vocationally. And sometimes the calling is something outside of the 9-to-5 day-to-day job that we do. So for some students, for some individuals, I think the calling and the career go together. For others, they might not be exclusive of each other.
Interesting. Wow. So do you think God calls us to certain careers over others, or rather calls us to, like you were saying, callings rather than careers?
I think it can be both. I think God gives everyone particular talents and gifts and abilities. And I would say that as we think about what your calling might be, I have a pretty good hunch that it's going to be something that uses those gifts, those abilities, those talents. It's one of the things that I really encourage students to do is look more at their skills and their abilities, because I think that there's a lot of good data, a lot of good information available. There's so many different majors, there's so many different academic departments, there's so many different things. Students can do the same major, do the same academic program, and go in a lot of different areas. And sometimes students feel stuck. Like, well, what do I do with this degree in business or in healthcare or, in computing? And I tell them, if we look at where your skills are, I think that there's a lot of information there that can kind of help us in learning how to use those skills, how to use those gifts, and be able to sort of channel that into something that more aligns with their calling.
So how would you say you figured out what your calling is? If it happens to be your career, like, I feel like that's a lot easier, like you said. But how do you figure out like what your specific calling would be? Or how do you know you have that or found that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times the career comes first, because I think sometimes, and I've warned students this, and I think about my own path, having to do a number of different things, enjoying a number of different things that I've done. But I remind students that if you talk to individuals, that their career path can be a series of turns in the road. And so I think that sometimes it involves doing a number of different things to kind of say, I identify this as my calling. That some of the steps along the way, I can see how, and I look at my own story and I see how God has blessed the steps that I've taken and the number of different careers and the things that I've learned, the things that I've done. But I think it was taking those different steps, none of them quite felt like the calling. And I feel like, and I'm blessed in the role that I have now, that it's the combination of the things that I'm interested in and the talents that I have, where I'm able to kind of put my finger on it and say, for me, this is the calling. And so to the students, to the individuals that are kind of thinking, what is their calling? I think sometimes it's finding the career and having done several different things to kind of identify it as the calling. But I would say the opposite is also true. I believe that there are students, there are individuals that at a younger age, they feel called to something.
Okay.
And I think that's a very important part of the equation. That for those that say, hey, I feel called, that God has put me in a position, has given me these talents, that has put these individuals in my life. Sometimes the calling comes before the career. And the career is sort of the vehicle that allow them to live out that calling. So I don't think that there's necessarily one right answer for finding the calling and the career. Sometimes they're separate. Sometimes one comes before the other.
How would you exactly define a calling?
That's a great question, and I think it's a great question because I think that sometimes we do just put those together. Calling equals career, and I would definitely disagree. I think that the calling is sort of it feels like there's that spiritual element, that sort of divine appointment to it. I know that in some of the research I've read that there are individuals who feel they have a calling and it may not even be connected to the spiritual. They may be a non-believer, but they feel like that what they do, the job they have, the work they do to help others is their calling, their mission, their purpose. And so when we think about defining calling, I think those two words, mission, purpose, are in alignment with that calling, meaning that the calling and the career can be two different things. And they're not, while they can be the same, they're not always.
Like when there's a student, or like when somebody's approaching the workforce,
Yes.
and they see that they have these skills like the college has prepared them for,
Yeah.
and like equipped them with, and they go out and like see, okay, they have like several offers, and let's say they have an offer from like the church,
Yeah.
they have an offer from like some other organization or something, and that uses the same skills. Which way would you advise them to go?
I think there's several factors to consider. I think one of them prepare them, align them closer to their calling. But I think that other factors that they may consider and should consider along the way is the financial aspect of it. I think there's what will prepare me for the future. Is an opportunity going to set me up for success in the future? Is there going to be an opportunity that will provide me more skills and talents that I'll be able to learn more from, that will provide me better networking opportunities, and thinking about how that might align with things that they see themselves doing in the future. It's hard to give a black and white answer to that, because I think there's several factors that might complement or even contradict each other when it comes to making that decision.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yes. So how much would you say is there like a financial role that takes place when deciding whether you want to like pursue a position in the church or something outside of the church?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Xander, because I know that financial stability is something on the minds of, I talk to students who are graduating, who have just graduated all the time, and the financial security is a huge concern for them, and wondering if the role that they're pursuing or the path that they're choosing to go down is going to be able to also provide for them financially. And it actually reminds me what one of my fellow career counselors said at a fellow Christian school here. She says it's important that students find their calling and such, but she goes, at the end of the day, they need a job as well. And so balancing that is tricky. But I know for me, when I think about my own role and I think about what I do here at the university, I know that there are a lot more benefits and things that that fit my needs and what I'm looking for in a career. And I think that the opportunity to be able to work with some of the individuals that I do, and the work that I do in helping students, knowing that in the career counseling that we do, and the career testing we do, and the assessments we take them to, and the job preparation we provide to them, that I get a great amount of fulfillment from being able to help students hopefully be set up for success in their future. That in a way that tools that I'm giving them, the things that I'm teaching them, make the any sort of financial compensation that I might be giving up very much worth it. I remind people, I say that, in leaving Southern for a year, I found that I was reminded what my values are. I was reminded what is important to me in a workplace environment, what is important in the work that I'm doing. And while the year away gave me a lot of time to learn, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect as well. And so I think it's important to remind people that when we think about our career and our calling and the role that the financial compensation might play, that there's a lot more at the end of the day than just the paycheck. And that while the paycheck's important to help us take care of our life necessities, that there's a lot of other things that go into that decision and very important things to consider. Yeah. I know, and I kind of said this in the beginning about kind of giving the heads up, because I know that my views on calling differ from some of my wonderful colleagues here at the university, where they feel like calling is something they can give you a test on, or that, you can figure it out in inside of your first year, certain activities or things you do. And like I said, to me, that's something I kind of I push back on a little bit, because I think it's a lot more involved process. Finding your calling isn't something that happens overnight. It's not something, finding your calling is not something you can take a test for. Finding your calling is not something that you do a job for a few weeks and then quickly check the box of I found my calling or I dismiss it as my calling. I think it's a lot more involved process.
Would you say it's more about the journey itself than the destination, or is it like reaching that destination?
I think it's both.
Both?
I think it's both. I think in the journey will help when you get to the end, sort of cement your calling. I sometimes think back, well, what if I had taken a different major or gone to a different school, or, how would I tend to believe that, God would have put me in the right direction, that the path would have ended up where I was supposed to be. I kind of sometimes think about it as sort of an athletic coach, where you make decisions during a game. And I look back at my past and I think, at the time, hopefully in God's leading, that I've made the decisions that I think were best. But at the time, then you look back in the short term and you go, well, maybe that didn't seem like the right decision, or maybe I took this job, or I did this, or I missed this opportunity. But I think it's when you get to the end, you can look back and say, well, the decisions I made along the way, for the most part, have made sense. Like, I can see God's leading in them. Even when I couldn't necessarily along the way, I think, okay, I'm thinking I'm making the right decision. And then you get somewhere, or you do something, you go, maybe you're questioning it. It's when you get to the end and when you kind of say, okay, looking back, I think it all makes sense, that there was a method in the madness, and God did know what he was doing the whole way.
Yeah. That's fair. What about to the students who, like, maybe college just isn't the best resource for them?
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel, how do you discover, like, I'm just going straight from high school to the workforce even?
Yeah. I think it's a great opportunity for some students. I think, I kind of joke that for some students, college is 13th grade. They say, well, I'm doing this because it's the next best step. And I've actually talked to several students in the last year who have, either in talking with me or talking with somebody else, or sort of doing their own journey, have come to the conclusion that college is either not the right place for them, or it's not the right place for them right now. I think it's very difficult to ask someone that's 18, 19 years old, hey, figure out what you're going to do the rest of your life. But I think there is that expectation put on them sometimes by family, by friends, by themselves. Sometimes I have that conversation with students where I go, well, I really expect a lot of myself, and I'm getting all these good grades. I really need to know what I'm going to be doing. And that's where I kind of encourage them to say, look, we don't have all the information now. The funny thing is that, Xander, we ask students to pick a major when they start college. But I remind those students that in reality, you pick a major, and then the next 4 to 5 years, you're going to take all these classes that teach you all these things about this academic area. And you accumulate so much data in that 4 to 5 years between the classes you take, the professors you meet, the friends you interact with, the internships that you do. And it's when you get to the end, when you're getting ready to finish your degree, to walk across the stage and get your diploma, I said, that's actually when you have the most data. That is when you are in the best position to make a decision about your career. I remember a conversation I had with a student a couple months ago. She was switching to a business major. And she felt a little bit, while she had taken some career tests and we had some conversations, she was still feeling a little bit lost and a little bit maybe even discouraged, because she's like, well, I'm changing my major. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. I told her, so the nice thing is you have 2 to 3 years before you actually have to make that decision.
Yeah.
That, in the degree you've chosen, you're going to take a lot of different classes. You're going to get a lot of data about yourself, and you're going to find things you enjoy and things that maybe aren't as good a fit for you. And I remind her, I said, you don't have to make this decision today. And that's for sort of choosing your major and your first job after college.
Yeah.
And when we think about choosing your calling, finding your calling, I said, we're welcome to, and I think God invites us to be able to acquire a lot more data and have a lot more experiences before we should feel the pressure of, okay, this is something I identify as my calling.
So what about the students who, like you say, hold off on that decision and they come to like graduation day and they're still like, maybe this degree wasn't something I actually want to do.
Yeah.
How do you approach that student?
I think I remind students, we do the best what we have right now. And maybe that involves working in a job that isn't a great fit for you right away. Maybe to be able to provide financially, for example. Maybe it involves doing something that's a little bit different than what you originally saw yourself doing with that degree. Maybe it involves going back to school. Maybe it involves networking and shadowing. I know that for myself, there was a time in my life where I questioned whether I was going to continue in the career I was in. And one of the things I did was talk to a number of individuals in my life and ask them about their job and what they liked about it and what skills were required for it and what got them up every morning to go into work and what they didn't like about it. What frustrated them about their role, in an attempt to kind of learn a little bit more about all the different things that are out there to do. And so I think that for that student who gets to the end of their college degree and says, I'm still stuck, I'm not quite sure if I think it just means it's time to do some more exploring. And the exploring might come in addition to the job they're doing. And the job they're doing at the time is allowing them to continue to explore and to not feel like they have to have the answers figured out right away. And again, I would remind that person, talk to a number of older individuals in your life, and you'll see that their career path has gone all over the place. It's very typical. A recent survey of Americans showed that about 52% of all Americans indicated that they have thought about changing jobs or changing careers in the next year. And so if it's not on the forefront of someone's mind, it's close.
Yeah.
It's coming soon. So, and especially in this day and age, I think there's a lot more of acceptance of people changing jobs and careers. And because of that, it allows people to be able to transition and take some of the skills. I mean, I look back at my journalism background, and I learned how to read and how to write well and how to edit. And now I use those skills to help students with writing resumes. And so, some of the skills and talents they've picked up along the way, I think there's opportunities in the workforce now to be able to do different things with them.
Can you tell us what role passion plays when you're looking for your calling?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say I think passion is important. But I think that passion can be a bit of a fickle indicator, a fickle metric for finding one's calling. And the reason why I say that is that sometimes we find we are passionate about things that don't necessarily align with what our calling might be. And I use the example of when we think about our passion, it is very possible, Xander, to be passionate about something and not be good at it. And I talk to students all the time when I ask them about what sort of career advice have you received about choosing a career, choosing a major, finding your calling. And one thing that I hear students say frequently is, well, my family, my friends, my professor says, well, you just got to find something you're passionate about. And I always hesitate a little bit when I hear that. because I use myself for example. So one of my hobbies is disc golf. I love disc golf. I picked up disc golf about 16 years ago, and I really enjoy it. It's my number one hobby. And in fact, last week, recently I should say, I just played my 600th different disc golf course. And so
Congratulations, Rick.
thank you, thank you. And I've disc golfed in 24 different states, and it's something I very much enjoy. But I also remind people that for me, while I'm passionate about disc golf, it is strictly a hobby. And that if I woke up next week and said, I want to stop being a career counselor, I want to pursue disc golf as my passion, as my calling, I'm going to be in trouble, and I will likely be, I will likely upset my wife and kids, and I will likely be homeless, because it's very possible to be passionate about something and not be very good at it.
Yeah.
And so when we think about metrics we use to find our calling, that's where I go back to finding your skills, your talents, your God-given gifts. I think that passion is important. I think passion is something that you shouldn't necessarily use it, though, to guide your calling. I think take your passion with you, but don't use it just to follow.
Yeah.
Let me say that differently. Don't follow your passion, but take it with you. And I found that in talking with students, that sometimes students have found that by looking at their skills and their talents, they develop the passion. They develop something that would become a calling for them, but it wasn't because they were searching for something they were passionate about. It was searching for something they were gifted at, and the passion developed out of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. At least for me, like when I came to Southern, I was like strictly photography major. I had never even touched video or audio. I never wanted to.
Yes.
I had zero desire for any of that. I was like, I'm going to do photography, and then that is it.
Yes.
I took a class, Intro to Digital Storytelling, introduced me to video, and now that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
That's like my whole job is to make videos. It's very different, like you're saying. So like, I didn't initially find that passion. I had zero passion for video. But then you said like being exposed to it at college, being exposed and like learning about it, like that entire world, I found a passion for it.
Right.
So in your experience, how would you identify hobbies that are just hobbies and hobbies that could lead into careers?
Yeah, I think that you need to look closely at, are you able to use those hobbies that you're passionate about in a career? Is it something that you can be financially prosperous with? And sometimes, and I've talked to students that say, I'm really passionate about something, I'm really good at it, but I want it to remain a hobby. You know, I think having those hobbies that are something you enjoy doing and you're passionate about are very important in our work-life balance. And that maybe that hobby isn't something that you bring into the workplace. It's something that you utilize outside of the workplace as sort of something to help you with your mental health, to be used in witnessing to others, as a mission opportunity. Maybe it's not something that's in the workplace, but it's something you use outside of the workplace for a number of different purposes.